Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business interview series. I'm your host, John Jennings. And, I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little, especially in the nonprofit space. And today we get to meet a leader in the nonprofit space. So looking forward to that. But, one of the issues is I think we over complexify things. And I'm one of my mantras is that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business, where we just talk about some of the challenges that leaders face and how we've overcome them. And so today I'm joined by Roland O'Daniel, who's the CEO of the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning. So Roland, thank you for joining us. And why don't you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, or your background, and who you are and what you do.
Thanks, John. So again, my name is Roland O'Daniel. I'm the, as you mentioned, the CEO at the Collaborative. I've been a teacher. I always say I'm a reformed math teacher, started in 1988 and was looking for a new challenge the early 2000s. And on a whim, I sent my resume into the Collaborative and really liked the people that were there. And about 6 hours of interviews later, really thought they were doing some incredibly insightful and things that pushed the envelope a little bit. So I took a chance, left my teaching job, joined the organization as a math specialist inside of a literacy grant, of all things, but not really thinking about just about reading, writing, but thinking about how we support students in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and content. And I'll come back to that in a second, because we are a mission-driven organization. And our vision is an exceptional learning experience for every student. Our mission is supporting teachers and administrators in schools and providing those. And the reason I say that is because I really want all students to have the kind of learning experience I wanted for my own kids. I was lucky enough to have, my wife and I have 4 daughters, or four kids, and they have been able to take advantage of their education, and I want as many people around the state, around the region, to be able to do that as well. So at the Collaborative, we really think about what are some of those big educational issues that we can impact, and then we really do our research and think about ways that make sense to us. We do a lot with arts integration, because it forces people to think differently. So that idea of how do you have people interact with content, and the way you would do that is reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And that kind of drives a lot of what we do. How do we give people contextual interactions with content and then make it fun? We've got 5 models that we work with schools and districts across the region on: our adolescent literacy model, our adolescent literacy intermediate model, our artful reading model, and then our procedural fluency model, and our post-secondary skills. So those make up most of the work that we do. I don't know if that's too much information or not enough, John.
It's fascinating stuff. Now, just in full disclosure, I didn't know this before, that you're a reformed math teacher. I'm married to a reformed math teacher. She did that for many years. She's now in banking. So she got out of the classroom, but she was a outstanding math teacher, and I know she misses it as well. I'm sure you do as well. And I've worked with one of our local school systems on some of these types of programs, so I can feel your passion. And tell me what biggest impact that you've seen your organization make recently in public school systems, because I know it's an area that I think we all want to be better, and it just seems like it's one of those mysterious things, trying to find the magic answer, and there is no easy button, for sure. It's one of the phrases I often use in business: there is no easy button. But
I think that's really key. There's one of the hallmarks of the work that we do is we don't do one-offs, right? So you won't see CTL come in and do a presentation. Now, we'll do conference presentations, but we won't come in and do a training one day and then leave, because there's no real impact, right? The hard work starts after that professional learning experience. And so all of our programming is designed so that we work with teachers to go through that next level. And we do a lot of coaching with teachers. I to that point of, you can sit there and listen to Roland talk for 3 days in a row in the summer, but the reality is when you go back to that classroom and you got to start planning, that's when the questions arise. and that's when we want to be there. So we design all of our work to do that. I think the biggest challenge we've seen is part of that reaction to the pandemic. And that is that, one, there are fewer teachers in the field right now, so there's a shortage of teachers. The second piece is teachers are trying to overcome all the impacts from the pandemic, and I'm not using that as an excuse, but it is a reality. I think we're now coming through that a little bit. We're really getting some momentum going with some school districts. We're working pretty heavily in Jefferson County right this second, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing with the middle and high schools in JCPS. It's the beginning of the work, and as you mentioned earlier, it takes time. Nothing comes easy. So what we do is we work with teachers, and we work with teachers over multiple years. And there's something called CBAM, concerns-based adoption model, and that's how, if you want to look at systemic change and systems change, all the research is very clear. It takes at least 4 years, if not 6 years, to really kind of build that culture of where you're going to do that on a daily basis. It takes a top-down, bottom-up, both approach to really kind of get teachers and school administrators on board. So we invest in the long run, right? We're here for the long haul. We're really proud of the fact that we've been working with KDE for the last 8 years on comprehensive literacy state development grants. We know those are really important for a lot of the districts across the state who don't have a lot of money to invest in professional learning. They're trying to keep the kids in school and keep the kids with school books. And so they have to make priorities. And so those grants have enabled school districts to really think about the programming they want to bring in and support that work for long-term, 3 to 5 year work. And so we're focused on how we impact the student's daily experience. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Very good. That's exciting stuff. So I'm going to turn the attention a little bit now internally to your organization. Tell us a little bit about your team. How big is it? And tell me, you've been in this role for 6 or 7 years now. So what's been the biggest surprise for you, being that person at the top of the org chart, so to speak, and having some of the challenges you've had to face? What would be the biggest surprise you faced?
Well, so we have right now about 10 staff, and we run 4 EPS educational program staff full time, and then we have 3 or 4 consultants who work with us. So we fluctuate a little bit in that 15 down to, we've been as low in the last couple of years as 8, and just again, part of that pandemic issue.
Sure.
Depending on what projects we're working on. For me, I think the biggest challenges I've run into is in a small nonprofit organization, it's flow and it's money flow. And how do you look 2 years down the road and really try to smooth out those highs and lows? I think we've done a pretty decent job. One of the things that when I came on as the CEO that the board committed to was us doing more of our own work. One of the things that we had done previously is we worked with several other organizations in partnership, and people knew us as the Gear Up people, or they knew us as the Promised Neighborhood people. They didn't know CTL, even though they liked the work. They knew the projects and not us. And the problem is when those projects were over, they didn't call us. They called the people who Gear Up. They called the Promised Neighborhood people, and so we were kind of left out. And so one of the things that we've done in the last 7 years is to really focus on developing our own models and doing more of our own work wherever possible. That comes with some challenges because you've got to get the word out. And one of the things that I would say is our biggest challenge is we're not very good marketers. Some of that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't have a marketing budget, you're not very good at it. But we're working on that. And how do we get our name out there? How do we get our story out there? How do we show the successes we're having? But that's an ongoing challenge, especially for a small organization like us.
Yeah, and I've served in several nonprofit roles over the years, and there's always that dichotomy. You don't want to be out selling too much because you're not fulfilling the mission. But then if you get locked into fulfilling the mission, then suddenly there's no source of revenue, and you find yourself, and it's that catch-22 thing. How have you found that balance, or have you? Are you still working for looking for it?
Well, always open to ideas. So yeah, it's a challenge. Like one of the things that we do is we hire really smart people. I'm really proud of the team that we put together at CTL. We've got some, Ashley Perkins, Victoria Miller Bennett, Jen Wright, and Jenny Aberly, who all are bringing great thinking to the table. And one of the things that they challenge themselves on is how do they get better at some things like social media and storytelling, and really think about this idea. We became teachers not to become salesmen, and now we have to think about how do we adjust that or understand the process. And one of the things that a smart mentor told me one time is sales is not about selling something; it's about helping somebody solve a problem they have. And that's been something that has served me well as I have conversations with people, listening to people, and figuring out what their problems are. And I may have something that can help them, or we may not have something that can help them. But bottom line is helping them figure out what their problems are, and that helps us then help them help their students. So
I had a mentor once told me everybody is in sales. You're just not necessarily selling a product, but you're selling your ideas, you're selling your your personal values, your vision, all that stuff. We're all in sales to some degree, and that was hard to understand, especially when I was in corporate IT. That wasn't something that came natural. And then later, when I got into sales, I went, yeah, it's actually not that different. I'm just now asking for money instead of buy-in or something like that. Sustainability is a word I hear with my nonprofit clients and ones I'm involved with. Is that a focus for you? And I'm not talking about economic or the ecological sustainability. I'm talking about the nonprofit sustainability.
Yeah, that's a challenge. In this time period where money is nonprofit money is tight, or foundation money is tight. We do a lot of work for fee for service, and that's primarily is what's getting us through right now. Yeah, that keeps me up, 90% of the time when I'm awake at night. It's because it's not this year's budget. This year's budget's good. Last year's budget was okay. Next year's budget looks like it's going to be fine. It's the next year after that I don't have is where I would like it, and that keeps me up. And that idea of sustainability, and so we're always looking for what is something we can do to do our work more efficiently. What is something we can do to spread our work, and really kind of think about that idea of replicating some of that work. Part of the thing that makes us really good at what we do is our people are great coaches, and that's not something that necessarily scales as well. So we have some really smart thinking and things. So we're trying to balance that idea of how do we think about it differently. And it's part of our conversation. You kind of mentioned starting a podcast was a way for you to meet new people and do your work a little bit differently. It's still doing the work you want to do, but how do you just tweak it a little bit to get it out there a little bit differently? And that's some of the work that we're doing, is how do we rethink some of our coaching? Honestly, one of the things that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years because of the pandemic is we can do more coaching virtually now. It used to be teachers were really reluctant to do something like this. They wanted you to be there with them. Well, if we're working in Owsley County, Kentucky, that meant going down for a full day of pre-conversations that was not real efficient use of my time, and then either being there for 3 days to do the observations and then do the post conversations. Well, now we can schedule 20-minute blocks and just nonstop on the Zoom and spend 5 or 6 hours doing that. Go down for, in the next couple of days, go down, do my observations, and then leave my, scan my notes, send them back to the teacher, and then we can have our post conversation. Much more efficient use of our time. So that's one of the things that has made us a little bit more efficient. Just something as simple as that kind of tweak, and people beginning to embrace and acknowledge the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I still do most of my coaching in person because I love it, but I'm certainly when I get people who are more than a 20-minute drive away, it becomes very important to get comfortable with doing Zoom. And we've talked about the pandemic. We talked a little bit about it before. What the changes it created, but one is that it's made us all more comfortable with this. How many people knew what Zoom was before the pandemic? Right? It's a whole lexicon. Hey, you're muted, is a phrase that people didn't even know what it meant before.
Well, it's also opened up for me the opportunity to hire people who are not just local.
Right.
The issue is, where do we have the work? And if I've got a really good person who is living in Somerset, Kentucky, or is living in Bowling Green, who we want to work on a project, I feel much more comfortable now about bringing them on board and not having them have to come into the office very often. There's times we want people, the team in the office.
Sure.
But that has really been an eye opener for us as well. Again, it's efficiencies. Instead of people spending an hour and a half on the road every day to drive in from Georgetown or Shelbyville or wherever it is, they come in strategically, and then we just have staff meetings, or we just have meetings on Zoom, and people are getting really good about, what's the agenda, and let's tackle the agenda and have a reason for us to be there and make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. And I think that's again another evolving piece that helps us be more efficient, therefore sustainability.
So one of my favorite questions I like to ask is, if you could wave a magic wand in 12 months from now, everything could be lining up perfect, what would be different about your organization?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a really good question. There's from the organizational perspective, we've got some really smart thinking around procedural fluency. And procedural fluency is the idea of how do you add, subtract, multiply, and divide efficiently. And we've been working in that arena for a couple of years now. The result of the pandemic was hard on students, but the impact on mathematical reasoning as a result of the pandemic is flying under the radar on most people's thinking. Everybody noticed that the reading scores are down, but math scores took an incredibly hard hit. Yeah. And what we're really finding now is the conceptual understanding of the students took an even bigger hit. They may still be able to do some of the procedures, but they don't really understand what they're doing. If I knew everything was lining up in the next 18 to 20 months, that program would really be having the impact I think it should have or can have across all different grades, starting in kindergarten, going all the way up through 5th grade, but all the way even into middle school, especially with those students who are struggling, because we know the impact that students who have that conceptual understanding, they have a higher trajectory in mathematics. And we know reading is important for life, but you can have $1 million of impact on a student, on a high poverty student who has strong math skills. They can have a bigger impact from a math perspective than they do from a reading perspective. So we don't want to lose track of that. So I think if 18, 20 months things were lining up, I would see that program really taking off, because our literacy work is well found that it's already kind of taking off and doing what we expected it to do. I'd like to see that level of work also come out of our organization.
That's awesome. I'm a math guy myself. I minored in it. My wife taught it, so we're a math family. My daughter's an engineer.
Yes, and it's not rocket science. I think one of the things I like about the work that we're doing with procedural fluency is it's eloquent in its simplicity. You think about how you incorporate just different representations with students, giving them contextual understanding, but then it's game-based practice. Kids are not going to study their math table facts, but they will play games. And if you design the games well, then they will engage with it. And we're working with some high poverty students in Jefferson County as part of some intervention programs, and they love it. Like, one of the best things that's coming out of this is they want to come to class to do this work, as opposed to, I don't want to go to math class because I'm not going to be successful. That idea of how do you change that mindset, that's so important, especially for young students. And so, I'm biased. I think we do good work. And so I think that's something, again, if I could look 18 months down the road, that's where I'd love to see that kind of blossoming.
That's awesome. I hope that comes true for you. I'd like to end with one question, and I ask this of all the people I interview. If you're talking to some aspiring young person who's wanting to start a nonprofit, start something that means something to them, what words of advice would you give for them? As someone who's now been in this role now for several years.
So I'll give a quick snarky response. And I was talking with a friend of mine who started her own nonprofit about 6 or 7 years ago. And the first thing I told her to do was not to do it.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
It's a lot of work, and that it's a lot of uncertainty. And luckily she knew I wasn't serious, and she buckled down and did it. I would say this. If you want to start a nonprofit because you're passionate about something, that's the first thing. You need to be passionate, but then you need to put your passion to the side, and it needs to be a business, and you need to think about sustainability. So it's great that you're passionate about this for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. But if you don't build a good structure underneath that, when you leave, then that impact leaves. And that's something that is so critical. And you asked me if I was a founding CEO at the collaborative, and no, in fact, I'm the third CEO. And a lot of small nonprofits don't survive the founder leaving. And so I think our founder, Linda Hargan, did a nice job of setting a good structure in place and working the structure along with the content. And if I were going to talk with somebody who wanted to start one, I would really encourage them to make sure that they are working hard and are passionate, but they're building a structure underneath them.
Excellent. That's some great stuff, Roland. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you do. This is really close to some of the passions I have. Is there a way people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the collaborative?
Yeah, so the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning is a really long name. If you can remember that, great. But we're online at ctlonline.org, or we're CTL Online on all of our social media. So we can be found there. That's the easiest way of getting in touch with me. So yeah, our ctlonline.org is our website.
Excellent. Well, I wish you the best. I hope that magic wand happens. And to anyone who's watching this, I hope you appreciate everything that Roland and his team is doing. And I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
John, thanks a lot for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Absolutely.